Today everything is cloud, everything is connected. Systems communicate with each other. Some call it an API world, it's a data world.
I strongly believe that we need, let me say, a collaboration network to create efficiency, to simply being able to fulfill all the needs at the same time.
Welcome to our first session of our new interview series Inside Supply Chain. Watch, learn, discuss. Supply chain collaboration networks. Do they offer a real benefit or is it just a marketing buzz? That's what we are discussing today. Our guests are Professor Dr. Schupp from Schaeffler and Korbinian Reng from SupplyOn. To give you a short explanation, supply chain collaboration networks connect business partners along the extended supply chain and provide them with a digital platform for their joint operational processes. Mr. Schupp is one of the biggest Tier 1 automotive suppliers. Do you use supply chain collaboration networks and what do you think about them?
I would answer, of course, we use supply chain collaboration networks because we live in a network supply chain approach anyway. Yeah, we cannot work with only, let me say, single suppliers anymore. Yeah, we do know that we need a multi-tier approach. We do know that we need several suppliers to fulfill our products. So let me say we are used to the network approach. And what I would also like to say is that I strongly believe that we need, let me say, a collaboration network to create efficiency, to simply be able or being able to fulfill all the needs at the same time. Yeah? Without such a network, we would be lost, basically.
Korbinian, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, I'm happy that you're here to discuss with us. You're among the 4 companies who founded SupplyOn, and at that time, I think nobody talked about supply chain networks. I think in the beginning it was just a marketplace, so now it has developed to being a network. What has changed from your perspective compared to 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think the visibility and the environment has changed, of course, but at the time I think we called it buy-side marketplace, if I remember well. I'm not sure. Yeah, I was around at the time, but I was not so close to the supplier network at the time. So we started in smaller steps, but we also started with a digitalization capability that was not the same as of today. Yeah? So I think that digitalization has advanced drastically. Basically, it's cheaper now to communicate with our suppliers. And for, let me say, a user, a buyer, it is, let me say, simpler, more natural to communicate with the supplier based on a network approach in a digital way. And that's why I believe today, let me say, is the time, or it has become the time to use those networks in a more digital way. It was simply not possible at the time. It was more on a visionary level.
So how long does SupplyOn exist?
It was founded in 2000, and at that time, of course, nobody was talking about the cloud. What you said is exactly what I hear when I talk to other customers as well, or friends of mine who work in big companies. They say cloud is so normal, but it is only normal since a couple of years, and I think that makes the big difference if we look back. At that time, systems, companies were silos. They had a firewall and the ERP system in the cellar. Today, everything is cloud, everything is connected. Systems communicate with each other. Some call it an API world, it's a data world. So collaboration is now, let me say this as a technology provider, it's now simple possible, what hasn't been before.
Yeah, but if we have it since 20 years, and you're using it obviously since 20 years as Schaeffler is a co-founder, what's the buzz to talk about it now? Why is it so up to date now?
I think the potential is much higher now, and also the requirements of our customers, but also our own requirements have increased. I can give you an example. For example, so-called technical reviews is what we are doing meanwhile with our suppliers through this collaboration network, through the platform approach. Of course, you can do it, let me say, on paper basis, but it's much quicker to do it on a digital basis, and it has also the potential to store the data, to review the data, to challenge the data in a more distributed way of working. In the past, we also had, let me say, one-to-one relationships, but meanwhile, let me say, buyers change. We have suppliers that deliver to more than 20 locations, so we need a, let me say, scalable approach, and that's one example where we have that, for example. Yeah.
Okay. So that means with this technical review, for example, you can do things now which were nearly impossible before, because if I understand correct, you have a real collaboration on the platform. That's
Yes.
what you're saying. So can you give us more recent examples of what you've been working on?
I would like to give you one example. I've just sent it to you, Korbinian, some minutes ago. I checked on the web my own PhD thesis, and it has 3 parts. It was written not 2000, but 2003. I mean, I published it 2003. I wrote it in 2000, I believe, in 2001.
Takes a while.
It takes a while, yeah. And I wrote in 3 sections. One section was on so-called supplier strategy or category strategy, I called it at the time. And the second one was to analyze the supplier itself and to, let me say, have a closer look into the supplier. And the third part was what I called strategic value chains. Yeah? And I wrote it, and let me say it was more on a visionary level. Yeah? And I realized when I wanted to apply it at the time in my job that it was simply impossible, because it was not based, let me say, on a connected technology. Yeah? It was not possible without those connects. Then I've met a guy, let me say 10 years later, in Berlin. You know him, Heiko Wöhner. And I've met him, and we decided to do this collaborative approach with our supply chain at Schaeffler. And we started to do it based on a simple idea to first be able to communicate bidirectionally with our supplier based on EDI and web EDI. And our target was to add and build on that, to build on it by advanced shipment notifications, yeah, by global transport labels, by, let me say, managing the logistics flow based on a good information flow, which is part of logistics. And basically, over the years, we built on that, and we realized that it needs those network connects. Otherwise, it cannot work. It cannot be facilitated. And that's how we created, let me say, co-created with SupplyOn the real network in a way. And I have to say, together with this technology development, it was possible. Without it, it was not possible. So the idea was already there. It was already generated before, let me say, 2000. Yeah, we have to be honest. Supply chain management, the idea itself was there. But let me say, the realization depends on digitalization. And that's what has changed in my view. Yeah.
So Korbinian, what does the market say about SupplyOn and the digitalization?
Yeah, it's interesting. Now you say you talked about it, you wrote about it 20 years ago, and only from my feeling in the past 5 years, the market is talking about it. I think it started when Gartner, one of these leading companies for IT assessment of IT providers and market research, they defined this market segment as multi-enterprise supply chain business networks. So we call it collaborative supply networks as well. And they saw, yes, there is a market. This topic that you have created in your mind 20 years ago, and Schaeffler and the other companies have created as a company 20 years ago, has become very important in the market. And since this time, Gartner and other companies are talking about it, writing about it, and I think the understanding is there also in the industry at other companies that there are a lot of benefits out of it.
I agree. So in general, the benefits, we often discuss this, by the way, in my opinion, are that you are able to handle more things at the same time, or in a given time. But of course, the question is: do we really gain productivity? That's the let me say the big overarching question. And a friend of ours, Achim Wambach, maybe you know him. He is a famous economist in our country. He did a study together with his team and basically found out that, let me say, the productivity gains on a let me say country level, if you want, is not exactly visible. This was data 3 years ago, due to let me say missing evidence out of digitalization. So it's evident that more people use digitalization. It's also evident that new markets are being created or have been created. So more opportunity to make business on a, let me say, in the web or through the web. But the productivity gain was not visible yet. But in the meantime, we more and more see that the productivity kicks in, so that it is worthwhile, let me say, using the networks, that you really can gain productivity. We have just discussed it in our shareholder meeting with other shareholders of SupplyOn, that we see this gain not only for the buying company but also for the supplying company. And so let me say the last 3-4 years have shown that the productivity is coming, in my view. Yeah.
And what do you think, what are the mega trends to come for the next years, so other than productivity?
I think mega trends, besides your core topic, Korbinian, which is sustainability, in my view, is probably what we call digital supply chain twins. I think the idea to let me say bring a copy, so to say, of the collaboration network into let me say a digital space, and to optimize in this digital space and communicate in a bi-directional way with the real network. I think that's a true mega trend, in my opinion. And we will see a lot of benefits out of this. As Schaeffler, we have also, or we are financing a PhD study in Technical University of Berlin, where, let me say, the researchers work on this topic. And I think if I observe a little bit the university landscape, we see more and more, let me say, digital supply chain twins coming up that on the network level can create a lot of benefit, I think.
It's a super exciting topic, this digital twin, digital supply chain twin. I mean, you, Schaeffler, global company, big player, you talk about your supply chain twin. If I talk to BMW, they talk about their supply chain twin. Yeah. And in the whole context of a car, everyone is just a part. Every company owns just a fragment of this overall twin. Yeah. And I think, like your question, what are these mega trends? These, we call it data economy. Sharing, each company shares information, which is basically a little piece of the overall digital product or digital supply chain twin, and they share it, and overall it comes together to create this holistic digital twin. And that's exciting story, and it opens other questions. This whole question about who owns data. And I hear this very often when I talk to especially smaller companies. They say, okay, I understand this whole principle, but you know, I'm afraid with all these platforms people know, like Amazon, etc. You know, if you provide your data, your data will be reused. It might be misused. Others make the business out of the data you provide. So small companies are very hesitant to share this data because they are afraid it's going to be taken away from them. How do you tackle this challenge?
That was my point, and your question, I guess, a little bit earlier in this interview. I think we do have the chance for productivity gains, meanwhile, through the technology. Yeah? And once we assume that this is true for a moment, yeah, then of course it makes sense to share data. Yeah? Because if you get something back, if you get something out of it, then let me say you have an incentive to do it. And in my view, it is clearly getting visible that this is the case. I give you a simple example. when we do this, let me say, supply chain optimization on a network approach, one of our targets is to reduce inventory levels, for example. So if I inform as a buyer what my inventory level is to my supplier, then the supplier has, let me say, much more information to adjust his production process to my real inventory, not what I'm telling him, but if he has evidence what my real inventory is, and we think that through the whole supply chain, we can reduce inventory levels, and maybe even increase the performance at the same time, and we all save money. So that's, let me say, what has changed, the possibility to get money, let me say, out of the data sharing. So it's not basically a question of, do I want to share data? The question is, what do I get out of it? And today, we can clearly say, in my opinion, and clearly prove that it makes sense to share some level of detail, not all levels of detail, but some.
So you say, if I understand right, if every partner has a benefit, profits out of it, then everyone is willing to share it.
Yes, and the tendency increases. There's a famous study of Mr. Kruse. His name is Kruse. He has died many years ago, but he made a study together with his team, basically analyzing whether the managers of small and medium and also big size companies are willing to share data, are willing to collaborate. And what he found is that in the brains of the people, the let me say, willingness to share at the time, is a few years ago, the study is evident, is present, but the execution was different. Okay, that's what he found. So we are all willing to share, but at the time, many years ago, we didn't do it. I say, and I think because we didn't have the means to do it, and now we have the means through this collaboration approach, like SupplyOn is basically pushing it and also showing it. And if, let me say, we get evidence that we can benefit, then let me say the trust in data sharing is increasing. I think that's what we see going forward.
That sounds exciting, because when I studied, I learned that automotive industry is very hierarchical. Everyone, the bigger tells the smaller what to do. And what you're saying is a really collaborative approach, being kind of on eye level. Everyone shares and everyone benefits. Is this something that has changed during the past years?
No, I don't think so. I think we have overall all the same target. The target is to sell good products. The target is to sell good products. Yeah? And if we have good products, we can make money. And if we want to, let me see, do that in a more efficient way, I think there's nothing against it. So it's not about hierarchy. It's about fulfilling the needs of the customer and giving the customer a better value proposition. And I think since a few years, with the idea, let me say, of collaborative networks, we can do that better. I think that's the message that I want to.
So can I kindly ask you to put together again the three main benefits, just as a highlight again for me?
Yeah, so I will try again. So overall, I would say let me say, the effectiveness of communication, collaboration, let me say, has increased. And in recent years, we also see that the efficiency has increased, which was, as I said, not proven a few years ago, until a few years ago. And by this efficiency improvement, we gain productivity, and that's exactly what we want. So, in other words, I think as a buyer, I would be foolish not to use such kind of network, because if I don't do that, I lose visibility. I lose, let me say, transparency, and I lose productivity, and that would be basically a mistake.
Okay, thank you. And what would you say if a company decides to look into a supply chain collaboration network? What are the most important steps to take if I want to implement that?
I guess you need to first establish communication in a structured way with your supplier. And you can do that by yourself. In principle, you don't need an established network. But once, let me say, the number of, you say, connects or contacts increase then probably it makes sense to go through a collaboration platform. And that's the benefit. Now, in the case of SupplyOn, I would say it's obvious by the history, the last 20 years, the network is already there. Yeah? So many suppliers are already connected. Yeah? And why not using this network? That's our principal approach. So I think the value of those connects is already there. And as a new user, you can simply go in there and at a, in my opinion, reasonable cost, you can establish such kind of communication and, let me say, enjoy the services as well. But also, you can develop own services. I think that's what you are doing every day together with your teams. So every buyer has an idea, a buying company. And of course, if you want to benefit most and best from collaboration networks, you're always invited to share ideas. That's what we do, let me say, at the combination or connection between science and, let me say, the practical life. We basically want to realize our ideas, and you can easily do that through digitalization, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add something. What you said is exactly what we see in the market. Companies understand they need a network, but they are sometimes afraid that, they have the network and then they are in a closed ecosystem. So that's why we call SupplyOn an open network, because we think it's important for the customers that they can say, I use the network, but I have own solutions, or I have an innovative startup that I also want to use. And I have to be able to bring all this together in a kind of best of breed and best of combination solution. Yeah. And I would recommend every company who want to use a collaborative network, make up your mind what you want to do yourself, what you need as a basic network capabilities, and then where you want to have other expert solutions, etc. And based on this, build your own strategy, how to use it. But the network is the basis there.
I think it's smart to, let me say, use also solutions that let me say, are developed on a smaller scale. If they solve a specific problem, why not doing it? Let me say, I'm let me say, keen on multi-dimensional auctions, for example. Not many people, let me say, use this type of, or have this idea of doing that. Then we develop a small solution and test it. And once we see that it works, okay, we scale it up. And so I think it's smart to always add also new startup solutions, own solutions. And as far as I'm informed, it's possible to do that through SupplyOn. Why not doing it? So I can only encourage. To
excellent.
Bring your solution, basically.
So, supply chain collaboration network, a real benefit or just digital marketing? I think we learned that there is more behind it than just marketing buzz. Thank you, Mr. Schupp. Thank you, Korbinian. And thanks for watching. Now, let's start discussing. Tell us what you think.